I'd like to welcome everybody to the special council meeting for June 5th at 5 o'clock. I see we have regrets from Councillor Jason Mady today. He couldn't make it here, and I believe Councillor McGuire-Blaise is still running a little bit late. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wyandot peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of the local and regional First Nations and of all the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. Any declarations of conflicts of interest for members of council? Seeing none, I need a mover for the published agenda. Moved by and seconded by that the special council meeting agenda be adopted. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor Hammond. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried unanimously. We will go to reports from administration. We have Rita Jabor, our Manager of Planning Services, and Director Lori Chadwick, Director of Development Services. And we're going to speak to site-specific zoning amendments for 793 County Road 50 East and 14 Wilson Ave. So pass it on to Director Chadwick.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi, and good evening, Council. So the purpose of this special meeting is for Council to consider amendments to the zoning bylaw for two separate planning applications, and to hear from the members of the public regarding the merits or the concerns related to those applications. This public meeting is a statutory requirement under the Planning Act. However, later tonight at 6 p.m. during your regular meeting, you'll see that we're bringing forward the actual zoning bylaw amendments themselves for your decision making. Although it is more common to see a few weeks in between the public meeting and a decision-making meeting on the zoning bylaw amendments, tonight's unique approach still satisfies the requirements of the Planning Act while allowing you as decision makers to expedite approvals for time-sensitive applications, such as one of the two before you seeking permission to construct an ancillary dwelling to accommodate the housing of farm workers. Our Manager of Planning Services, Rita Jabor, will walk you through both the planning applications at this 5 p.m. meeting, including a review of how these proposals meet local, county, and provincial policy. This public meeting will provide an opportunity to hear concerns and comments, which should be considered in your decision-making as a part of the full evaluation of the applications. If you find at the 6 p.m. meeting that further information is required that could not be addressed during the public meeting tonight, Council has always the opportunity to defer the decision on the amending bylaws. We thank you for your consideration and ready to begin if you are, Madam Mayor.
Through you, Ms. Mayor. We're going to pop up the presentation on the screen. And as Director Chadwick has noted, we're here tonight to consider two site-specific zoning amendments. The first being at 793 County Road 50 East, and our applicants on that application are Doug and Leslie Balsillie, and the second being for the property located at 14 Wilson Avenue, and the applicants on that application are here tonight as well, Claude and Joseph Dubé. Next slide, please. So as Ms. Chadwick noted, the purpose of this meeting is simply to hear the merits of the applications and to hear delegation requests from members of the public and the applicants. A decision will not be made at this meeting, but two reports will be presented for Council's consideration at the 6 p.m. meeting. And at this time, I also want to make a special notice that Ms. Corinne Chiasson, she's our senior planner, she has managed these two files since the beginning. She has been the person consulting with the two applicants. She's prepared the presentation tonight, as well as the reports, but due to conflicts in schedules, she couldn't be here tonight. So I just wanted to recognize her for all her efforts. Thank you. Next slide, please. So our first application tonight is 793 County Road 50 East. Next slide, please. And on this slide, you will see a map of the town of Essex. The red star denotes where the approximate location of the subject lands is, and it's located in Ward 3 along County Road 50 in Colchester. The official plan designation of the subject lands is agricultural, and the existing zoning follows the official plan designation. It's zoned Agricultural District 1.2 which permits limited agriculture and farm production support activities. That limited agriculture just refers to agricultural activities that are not livestock intensive. So all those exclusive of the livestock intensive operations. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you'll see the red star again, denoting where the subject lands are, and it's just a closer view of the property, which is delineated in that yellow border. You can see that it's located in a prime agricultural area. So all those lands that do not have a color code on top of them are agriculturally zoned and designated properties. Those lands in yellow are designated and zoned for residential uses. Next slide, please. In this slide, we further denote the property, but we also provide you with a few more characteristics. In terms of the property dimensions, it is 6.65 hectares in lot area, which equates to about 16.45 acres. It is 189 meters, about 621 feet in total street frontage, and its frontage is on County Road 50. County Road 50 East is a county road. It's designed to carry interurban and regional traffic. The existing buildings and structures on the site include one single detached dwelling, which is the primary residence of the applicants. And it also includes 3 outbuildings that are used in relation to the farm operation. So specifically, there is a greenhouse, there is a storage/cooler, and there's a outbuilding for the housing of equipment. There is also a roadside fruit and vegetable stand. Many persons are familiar with this property. It is the home of the Fruit Wagon operation on County Road 50. The property is accessed through one existing driveway, which is from County Road 50. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we provide a few on-site pictures of the property. The first picture on your left-hand side corner is simply a view of the property with its signage looking eastward on County Road 50 East. The second, moving to the right picture, is a picture of the driveway and with the two access areas branching off of County Road 50. And those access areas go to the existing dwelling and also serve as access to the farm. And on the very bottom, you'll see pictures related to the roadside fruit stand, as well as a picture related to the area of the agricultural production. Next slide, please. In this slide, you'll see a couple more photos of the existing structures related to the farming operation that exist on the site. The first is an existing 32 by 40 foot detached agricultural building that's used for storage as well as for market preparation. And the second is a 30 by 100 foot greenhouse. And on the very bottom, you'll see where the existing parking area is for the subject site. Next slide, please. So in the next few slides, we are going to speak about the proposed zoning change up for consideration tonight. Next slide, please. And specifically, the applicants are proposing a zoning change to permit a new ancillary dwelling to accommodate the housing of farm help. Next slide, please. The zoning bylaw defines an ancillary use as a use which complements or otherwise provides a service to the main use of the zoning district in which it is located. So in this case, the main use is the agricultural operation. A dwelling is defined as a building or structure that is occupied in whole or in part for the purpose of human habitation. So in other words, if we summarize the slide, the purpose of the zoning change is to permit an ancillary dwelling which is complementary to the farming operation because it will house farm laborers who work on site. Next slide, please. In our current zoning regulations for the A12 district, we only permit one single detached dwelling per lot in this zoning district. We also permit one second dwelling unit, which is accessory to the main dwelling, but it's not an ancillary dwelling. It's made for long-term human habitation. Any ancillary dwellings that are to be used for farm labor accommodations require a site-specific zoning amendment and are subject to site plan control. They are not automatically permitted under the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So reasons for the zoning change: site-specific zoning amendment required for proposed farm labor accommodations. The fruit and vegetable production is very labor intensive and it requires additional seasonal workers and accommodations on site. Hence the reason for on-site farm labor accommodation. Next slide, please. So in this slide, the applicants have provided us with a site plan, two site plans actually. The first site plan marked as site map, part block B, plan 1398. You will see the existing structures on site. So you'll see the 3 existing agricultural structures, as well as an area identified in red, outlined in red as the proposed structure, and the existing house and access area. And then in the site map that you see to the right, you'll have a clearer view of where that building addition is going to go for the purposes of housing farm help. So just south of the existing structure, which is currently used for market preparation. And if we move on to the next slide, we'll see a clearer view of where that proposed addition is to go. Next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see a interior layout of the proposed addition. So the ancillary housing for farm labor will be located on the 2nd floor. The bottom level of this addition will be used for agricultural purposes. The actual dwelling will consist of a living area, 4 bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchen facilities, and all the facilities that are required to live on site. Next slide, please. So in the next few slides, we're going to look at the policy considerations in making a decision on an application such as this. Next slide, please. Council's planning authorities must first look at the provincial policy statements to determine whether an application is valid. In prime agricultural areas, permitted uses and activities are agricultural uses. Under the provincial policy statement, housing for farm labor, full-time farm labor, is actually considered agricultural use. So in terms of meeting the criteria under the provincial policy statement, this is dwellings for agricultural purposes, housing of farm help. It is a permitted use in the prime agricultural area. Next slide, please. Reviewing Town of Essex official plan policy, 1 or more ancillary dwellings for the purpose of housing farm help may be permitted by site-specific zoning bylaw amendment and site plan control approval where the following criteria are met. So in terms of determining whether this application meets the policies of the Town of Essex official plan, council must be satisfied that the farm operation is of such a size and nature that this assistance is required and residential accommodation needs to be located on or close to the farm, and that the ancillary dwellings are located on the lot and accessed in such a way to prevent the creation of a severable residential lot in the future. Next slide, please. So in the next couple slides, we're going to break down the criteria one by one. So in terms of need, the fruit wagon is the agricultural operation that's currently on site. And as I mentioned earlier, it's used for fruit and vegetable production. The total area under cultivation of fruit production is approximately 6.6 hectares. The on-site ancillary dwellings would allow for the centralization of operations. There are cost savings to not having to transport workers. The accommodation needs to be located on or close by the farm. Management is available on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As I mentioned earlier, the owners of the fruit wagon also live on the site. And the ancillary dwelling would host 4 rooms with shared facilities and common areas. So in terms of the first criteria, planning's opinion is that it does meet the criteria and that the size and the nature of the operation requires the on-site farm accommodation. Next slide, please. Again, you're provided with a site plan of the proposed area. And again, location of the accommodation is on the 2nd level of the new addition. We've added this slide because we want to show you that in terms of severability, it would not be possible because it's attached to an agricultural outbuilding. So the proponents could not sever the dwelling from the agricultural outbuilding in the future. So this is the way we meet that second criteria and ensuring that severability is not a possibility. Next slide, please. In the next slides, we're going to speak about the agency and public comments that we received. Next slide. As per Ontario regulation, we have circulated notice of this application to all property owners with 120 is. And on the screen, you'll see what approximately 120 meters is from the subject property, and all those properties that red line touches would have received notice. But we didn't receive any comments or written objections or letters from the public as of June 5th, 2023. Next slide, please. We also circulated the proposal internally, and we did receive comments from our infrastructure department who advised us of no objections. The applicants do require a new septic system for the ancillary dwelling, but there's no additional water service needed. The applicants have submitted an application under the building code for a new septic system as well. We received comments from the Essex Region Conservation Authority who had no objections, as well as the County of Essex because it is located on County Road 50, who also expressed no objections. Next slide, please. Okay, that concludes the conversation on the first application, and I'm going to stop here, Madam Mayor, so we can take comments.
Thank you, Mr. Boer. That was really thorough. Great application. Great work there. Any questions or comments from members of council to our administration? And if we do have the applicants in the room, if we have questions for them, we would just need a motion from council to allow them to speak. Councillor Verbeek. You have a question for them? Okay. So we have that moved by Councillor Verbeek, seconded by Councillor McGuire Blaze. Any questions on that motion? All in favor? Okay, that is carried. Okay, I don't know, Doug or Leslie, which one of you want to speak, but you have to go back to the podium and turn on the mic. It's pretty official here. Okay. All right. Oh, Councillor Verbeek, ask your question.
Through you, Madam Mayor. It's a really quick question, a simple one, not putting you on the spot, but I also take a moment while you're here to apologize for not recognizing you when you walked in the room and I was shaking the dust off. When I saw this, I thought, yay, I'm really happy to see you growing your business, and this looks like a wonderful, best case scenario for housing farm help, right? My question was simply, I know there's 4 bedrooms. How many workers do you expect to house in there?
Currently have 4 workers. We currently have 4 workers, and we currently rent a house off-site. But the building is more than an accommodation. It's also agricultural storage. It'll have an additional cooler in it and stuff. Our business is growing. And we just need to increase our capacity. And so bringing our workers on site was a big part of that. So,
well, thank you for that. I could see that in the drawings that clearly you're headed towards more growth, and that's wonderful. That I'm really happy to hear there's only four workers. That looks like a beautiful place for your workers to live too.
Yeah, we're very, we think it's important that they each have their own room, some privacy. I mean, not only these 4 guys come and work together 10 hours a day, but they also have to live together, right? And having some privacy and some ambiance is a big part of making a group of people work, because it is quite a commitment on their part to come and do that. So, and we couldn't do it without them. So.
You want to just push your mic off? We'll go to Deputy Mayor Shepley, and then if we come back to you, we might have to come back to you. Then you just push your mic again. Deputy Mayor Shepley?
They answered all my questions in the end anyway, so thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Guerin?
Through the chair, to administration. So the amendment, the change to the bylaw, to the zoning, the first floor use, if it was just the first floor use without the rooms on top of it, would the first floor use be permitted?
Chair, they would be permitted as of right.
Questions from members of council? Okay, seeing none, I think we'll go on to application number 2.
Thank you, and through you, Ms. Mayor. Our second application tonight concerns the property at 14 Wilson Avenue. Our applicants are here tonight in the room, Mr. Claude and Joseph Dubé. Next slide, please. Thank you. On this slide, you'll see a map of the town of Essex again, but you'll also see that the red star has moved up north to Essex Center. This is the approximate location of the subject lands. They are 371.61 square meters, so 4,000 square feet of commercial lands within the downtown core of Essex Center, just east of the Main Street, Talbot Street. The official plan designation for the lands in the official plan is Central Commercial Essex Center, and the existing zoning and the zoning bylaw for the subject lands is Commercial District 2.2, which allows for general commercial uses, including dwelling units in a mixed-use commercial building. Next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see the subject lands. They are shaded in gray. So you'll see their location on the corner of Fox Street and Wilson Avenue, just east of the Main Street in downtown Essex. Next slide, please. On this slide is also another aerial map delineating the subject lands. However, on this map, you'll see buildings and structures on the actual property. So you'll see that there is a building, an existing building that occupies almost 100% of the property. Next slide, please. And in this slide, you'll also find our red star denotes the location of the subject lands. However, we've turned on the zoning layers in this slide. So you'll see that the area around the subject lands is red, which means all those lands are designated for general commercial uses. So it's located in a commercial area entirely. Next slide, please. In this slide, you'll see some on-street photos of the subject lands in the existing building. And the first photo to the left-hand side corner, you'll see a photo of the facade of the existing building along Wilson Avenue. If we move on to the right, you'll see a photo of the existing building as it is seen along Fox Street. And then at the very bottom, you'll see another photo of the subject lands as well. Next slide, please. Here's some more photos of the subject lands. The first being a photo of the alley, which directly abuts the subject lands. Another photo looking towards Fox Street, and another photo of the second-story amenity patio area on the existing building. Next slide, please. In the next few slides, we will discuss the proposed zoning change in front of us tonight. Next slide, please. The applicants have proposed a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the following: 2 new residential dwelling units on the ground floor within a combined use building. They're also seeking an exemption from parking requirements for the 2 new ground floor residential dwelling units, as well as an exemption from the amenity space requirements for the 2 ground floor residential units. Next slide, please. In this slide, we've provided a site plan so you can understand the layout of the existing building and what's proposed. The area in that aqua blue is Unit 1, which consists of a 112 square meter commercial unit. The area in pink is to be converted to a residential unit, and that is 960 square feet. The area in yellow is also proposed to be converted to a residential unit, and that measures 940 square feet. Unit 4, which is another area in blue, will remain commercial or for storage purposes. That's 330 square feet. And the area in green, which is located on top of the building, is an amenity area. So it's an outdoor space that is used by the tenants of the building. Next slide, please. On this slide, we've included some definitions to help you understand the zoning bylaw amendment in front of you tonight. A combined use building is what this building is classified as, and a combined use building is defined as having as main uses both dwelling units and non-residential uses such as commercial space for business offices. A dwelling unit is a room or suite of rooms used by or designated to be used by one or more individuals as an independent and housekeeping unit. So a combined use building is one where you can have both a business office as well as a place to live. And an amenity area is simply a landscaped open space yard or a recreational area that is accessory to a dwelling or dwelling unit. And again, it's used for outdoor space. Next slide, please. So the reason for the zoning change is because currently in our zoning bylaw for combined use buildings, all dwelling units must be located above the ground floor. They cannot be located on the ground floor. As well, section 11.5 of our zoning bylaw requires certain parking regulations anytime you want to include a dwelling unit in a combined use building. And that parking regulation prescribes 1.25 parking spaces for each dwelling unit, and that 15% of those parking spaces are to be reserved for visitor parking. And finally, section 19.1 of our zoning bylaw requires a dwelling unit to have amenity space. So in this case, the proposed dwelling units are 2-bedroom apartments. So they require 15 square meters of amenity space. So thinking back to those zoning bylaw amendments that are required, the proponents are here tonight to request relief from those parking regulations and to request relief from the amenity space regulations, in addition to allowing the extra dwelling units on the ground floor. Next slide, please. In the next few slides, we're going to talk about some policy considerations to help us facilitate decision on this application. Next slide, please. First and foremost, we must look at the provincial policy statements, and these lands are located in the primary settlement area. In the primary settlement area, the PPS dictates that we are supposed to consider increased intensification, which optimizes resources, infrastructure, and public amenities to accommodate more residential uses. We're also supposed to support a range of housing options, which includes affordable dwelling units and mixed-use buildings within downtown core areas where communities can become more walkable. We also need to support improving accessibilities for persons with disabilities, special needs, people who use mobility devices, and we need to include all demographics in reducing land use barriers for full participation in the community. And that is accomplished by allowing for residential diversification and different housing options. We must also promote opportunities for redevelopment and revitalization within cultural and historic districts where appropriate. We must encourage compact, mixed-use development compatible with employment uses and promote livable and resilient communities. And we must also support intensification where there are full municipal services such as potable water, storm, and sanitary sewers. This site has availability in terms of the road network. It's owned by the municipality of Essex, and it also has access to potable water, storm, and sanitary sewers. And it's also located within the downtown within walking distance to shopping areas. So in planning's opinion, this application meets the criteria under the provincial policy statement. Next slide, please. Next, we must consider the policies under the Town of Essex official plan. Our official plan for lands that are designated commercial center, Essex Center, allows for mixed-use buildings, for buildings that have both residential and commercial uses. However, it wants to promote, to the best of our ability, the main street, the main street level be designated for commercial uses, and that's to simply promote commercial activity on the street level. But it does permit mixed use types of uses. So the OP, the official plan, supports higher density mixed land uses of employment and housing with shared amenities that create vibrant, walkable, and compact downtown core areas. The official plan recognizes that town centers are and that they need to evolve, they need to adapt, and they need to be able to redevelop as market conditions and consumer needs and preferences change and retail trends change over time. It promotes mixed-use redevelopment projects such as this. It wants to preserve to the greatest extent possible a strong and vibrant retail and office commercial presence at the street level. And it wants to promote development and redevelopment in a compact built form with shared parking and removal of any barriers that improve accessibility. It also wants to encourage infilling, residential intensification, housing rehabilitation, and renovation and repair of downtown core buildings. So it's important to note here that although 2 units will be converted or are proposed to be converted for residential purposes, that this building is not being lost entirely to residential development. There will still remain commercial component. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, the reason for the zoning bylaw amendment is because the mixed-use building, residential units are only allowed to be located on the 2nd story of a building. We talked a little bit about how this application meets the criteria under the official plan, provincial policy statement. And in this slide, we just emphasize further that this application would create 2 new accessible residential units within close proximity to the downtown main street. It would provide a redevelopment opportunity for a building that has experienced challenges renting the commercial space. The applicant has expressed a demand for accessible units. The existing building is over 80 years old and has no elevator. And Fox Street is a small side street within downtown area that receives light traffic and contains underutilized on-street parking. So that last point is simply to help justify the amendments to the parking regulation. Next slide, please. In this slide, we just look to justify further the parking space exemptions. So we are asking council to consider that this existing building covers 100% of the subject property. There is no opportunity for on-site parking. Wilson Avenue and Fox Street have a combined total of 24 on-street parking spaces. Essex Heritage Gardens Municipal Parking Lot is opposite of this building, and it contains 97 spaces. The relief required for the new residential unit is actually 3 spaces, and this has a minimal impact to neighboring commercial businesses. And finally, the parking bylaw limits daytime parking on Fox Street and Wilson Avenue to 2-hour maximums between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. We wanted to bring this up to council's attention as well to note that there are no restrictions for overnight parking, and council could consider removing the daytime parking restriction from Fox Street if they so choose to help accommodate on-street parking for these uses. Next slide, please. In this slide, you'll see a better view of the location of the subject lands. The area that's dotted in black is actually a parking exclusion area. So any lots that are located in this area, if you're operating certain commercial businesses, you do not need to provide on-street parking. However, because the proposed is a dwelling unit, not a commercial use, parking regulations apply. Next slide, please. And finally, in this slide, we seek to justify the amenity space relief. So for consideration for council tonight, the existing 2nd story outdoor patio is 44.4 meters, which is 477.8 square feet. And that is available for all residential tenants of the building. So there currently is outdoor patio space for tenants of this building. The building is located opposite of the Heritage Gardens Municipal Park and Pavilion, the Essex train station, and Greenway Trails, which is available for public use, specifically public amenity use. Next slide, please. So in the next final slides, we're going to speak a little bit more about the agency and public comments that we received as a result of circulation. Next slide, please. In this slide, we summarize those comments. So we've heard back from our infrastructure services division, and they note that each unit must be water metered, and they confirm that each unit has a separate water meter. This was confirmed by the applicant. They also note that parking within the right-of-way is not designated to one business, building, or unit, as it is meant to be public parking. The town does not have a parking permit program, and the town cannot designate specific on-street parking spaces to businesses or residential units. We've heard from our development services department, who had no objections, and development services consists of economic development and building services as well as planning. And we've also heard from Essex Region Conservation Authority, who had no objections as well. Next slide, please. As per regulation, we've circulated all property owners within 120 meter radius. Everyone in that blue bubble would have received direct notice in the mail, but we received no comments from the public as of June 5th, 2023. As of this morning, we did receive comments from Councillor Hammond, and I'd like to summarize those comments for members of the public and those who may be listening tonight. Councillor Hammond asked specifically about the age of the building and whether or not if the commercial spaces being considered for repurposing have ever been rented as commercial spaces prior to their current vacancy. He also asked if the town knows by which means the commercial space was advertised for rent and how much money was being asked for the current commercial space versus what will be asked for residential residential rent if the zoning amendment is approved. And I was able to speak to Mr. Claude Dubé, who's also in the room tonight, and his response was that the building is approximately 80 years old. It was built in or around the 1940s. The commercial units have never been occupied under Mr. Dubé's ownership. He has owned the building for 6 years. They were occupied under previous owners, and to the best of his recollection, the space was used in the past for business offices. He has tried to rent the commercial space as recent as 1 year ago. He received only one expression of interest, which never evolved into anything serious. And he never put a price on the commercial space because he wanted to wait until he had a serious tenant. The building needs extensive work, and the price will be dependent on the tenant's needs. He hasn't confirmed the price he would be renting out the units should the zoning bylaw amendment pass, but he suspects that it will be in or around $1,700 per month. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we're going to speak about next steps for both the applications. Next slide, please. Following this meeting at 6 p.m., we do have 2 reports and proposed bylaws for council's consideration. At the 6 p.m. meeting, council can decide to approve the proposed bylaws, where notice of approval will be sent to the applicants and all persons requesting to be notified of the decision, and a 20-day appeal period would take effect. Or council can choose to defer the decision to a later date if they feel that further information is required. Or council can choose to deny the proposed bylaws, where then we would send notice of denial to the applicants and all persons requesting to be notified. And as well, a 20-day appeal period would take effect. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. That concludes our presentation, and I'm here for any questions as well as the applicants.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Questions from members of council. We'll start with Councillor Guerin and then Councillor McGuire, please.
Thank you, through the chair. To admin, so I'm looking at the aerial view of the units. It's a 2-story building, and what we're showing on here is just the main floor usage, correct?
And at this point, we're just asking questions to administration. If council has specific questions to you, we will make a motion and have you speak just like the previous applicant.
That's correct. It is just a site plan of the lower level.
What's the top level right now? What is the usage for it? Is it occupied? It is zone commercial. Is it occupied commercially right now?
For you, Ms. Mayor, the applicants can probably confirm, but from my understanding, the top level is occupied for residential purposes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've done this before in the past. I think we've been using the 50-50 rule in these instances for the main floor. So at the end of the day, what would the percentage of the space be residential versus commercial? If we were to approve this, it looks to me like it'd be well over 50% residential versus commercial. Do you know what the percentage would be?
For you, Ms. Mayor, I do not. We haven't been using a 50% rule. It's really just based on the use of the building and where the location of the building is and what will be left over in terms of commercial.
Okay, yeah, I thought the one in McGregor that we approved was 50% front to back, and the one we just did in Arthur was 50%. 2 units versus 4 units.
Through you, Ms. Mayor, a lot of applications come out that way. But it's not a criteria that we have in our zoning bylaw or our official plan.
Okay, so last question then is, what would the zoning be if we approved this? Would in the future, if the land became owned by another proponent and they want to switch back to commercial, would it easily be able to switch right back?
Through you, Ms. Mayor, yes. So it would just be an additional supplementary zoning amendment to allow the residential units. But at any time, if ownership changes or if the current owners find a commercial tenant, they could use that for commercial purposes.
Counselor Garren, for now? Okay, Counselor McGuire Blaze, and then Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Thank you through the mayor. To administration, we have other apartments in town that are on the second floors. Do they currently have 1 outdoor space and 2 assigned parking?
You, Ms. Mayor, it depends on when they were created. If units were created before the passing of our zoning bylaw in 2010, they may not have those requirements. I know a lot of the buildings in the downtown are quite old and they would have been built to the standards of that day. These are relatively new regulations 10, 15 years ago.
Blaze, Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Madam Mayor, out of curiosity, is the administration worried that, I mean, we've got some empty buildings downtown. I mean, the easy dollar right now is accommodations for people to live in. And are we not worried by doing this that we're opening the door to have a lot of commercial spaces coming and asking for this very same thing on Main Street and around?
Mayor, as with any applications, it's site specific. So we look at the proposal. Certainly, if the proposal was to convert the entire building, it would be a different application entirely, and we would take note of the stock of commercial spaces. But every application is addressed on its own merits.
My last question, I guess, basically would be, and maybe we have to wait and have proponents answer that. If the top floors are rented, I don't know if we can ask this, but if they're rented, what are they renting out? And how long have they been rented? And like, what would the range in rent be on those units? And how long have they been rented out, just to give us an idea?
Sorry again, Deputy Mayor Shepley, is that a motion to have the proponents speak? I need a seconder, Counselor Verbeek. Any questions to that motion? All in favor? Okay, Joseph or Claude, I'm not sure who's going to answer, but you have to go back to the mic and then turn the mic on.
Mr. Shepley, can you hear me okay? Okay. The question was, how much are the units currently rented? Yes. How much are they currently rented for? Well, our overall intention when we first purchased the property was to have the rent as low as possible. When we purchased the property, it was intended to facilitate anybody working in the downtown core, providing an option, housing option that would be relatively close. That being said, the current rental price that we are offering to those units is $1,700 right now.
Per units right now, currently? Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from members of council to either the proponents or administration? I just have, I think they're darling, cute little apartments, 2-bedroom. I think they're great. One question I have is, we are saying accessible, and my worry is that we don't have a mechanism to, like, we can market it as accessible, but if we don't save an accessible parking spot, which we don't, then we're almost telling people like, hey, we have an accessible parking spot, accessible apartment, but we don't have a parking spot. So that's where I might not be making sense. In my head, I do, but if we're going to be fully accessible, the parking is the thing that kind of worries me. I do also believe that we should pull out, if we are moving forward, we should pull out the 2-hour daytime parking restriction on a section there, just in case somebody works midnights They don't want to have to move their car every 2 hours. I'm okay with having the amenity space up there as a patio because I think the people will get out and walk around all of our beautiful parks. And I think that your tenants will put money back into our system by walking to restaurants and purchasing goods here. So I like it. Okay, any further questions right now? Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Question. How are we going to guarantee that, like, I don't know, I know you can't really guarantee it, but I have a feeling that when those apartments are so closely rented to CIBC and some of the alleyway businesses that there's not going to be issues parking. I mean, we rented a building, we had one of the buildings there and we always had people in our spots. I'm just wondering how you could ensure, if there's any way you could try and encourage your tenants to not use that parking, you know what I mean? So it would be very valuable to the CIBC and all the surrounding businesses where they're at.
Fortunately, I have had a long opportunity over the past few years to study the parking situation and who exactly parks on Wilson, who exactly parks on Fox Street, and who utilizes the primary parking across the street, which houses the 97 provisional spaces. So at this time, the people that currently occupy the Fox Street is the insurance company just sitting on the corner, not so much the CIBC workers. The CIBC workers default to using the parking lot, which has this 97 parking spaces. And through my evaluation and what the town has already noted with respect to the amount of parking that is used on any given time is roughly around 25%. And I can make that assessment based off of all the cameras and the recordings that I take and then an evaluation as to how much parking is actually available in the area. I do not believe that we're going to impact parking in any negative way. That being said, our current tenants do tend to use the parking lot across the street. If they do use Fox Street, they have already left in the morning time before anybody arrives for their shifts downtown.
Here, one question. The two units that are in the blue on the map with the colorings, it says commercial or storage. Can you tell us what is in there now?
So right now, the entire commercial section is unused. That small blue section is currently being used for storage. It used to be at some time a small restaurant, I believe, well into the past and before we even seen. It is facilitated with a bathroom facility. Our intention with using that space was to either create another commercial opportunity, which we feel the space is just too small to warrant. So we were hoping and leaning towards using the space for storage for our tenants, additional storage for our tenants, and or a potential fitness facility for the tenant as well. But ideally, we wanted to, I know it's staying commercial. We would like that we're going to leave it open and hopefully we'll get some potential interest with respect to that unit in conjunction with the unit that we have facing on Wilson Street. So when we originally purchased the building, our intention was to have residential and use the commercial downstairs. The businesses that we are interested in installing down there, they just fell short from being actually able to lease out the way that we wanted to. So we're stuck in a position where we can't accommodate the entire commercial space, but we feel that we can successfully lease and rent the commercial space that's been designated in the proposal on Wilson Street.
We have Deputy Mayor Shepley, unless you have anything further, Councilor. Okay, Deputy Mayor Shepley.
One last follow-up question. I just noticed this as you brought Councillor Allard brought it up. I'm looking at your map here on your diagram. And if you notice in the blue on your diagram, you've got the accessibility circle, which shows the accessibility of the blue washroom. And I don't see one, and I don't see that would work inside your two washrooms to promote these as accessible. I don't think that you might have to move some layout changes in order for that to work in that space. Just something I noticed as of now. I mean, I work in construction, so I did notice that, and I didn't put it together till he brought it up about the other that they wouldn't necessarily be accessible to a wheelchair based on your drawings here.
No, the only handicap accessible commercial unit at this time is the one off of Wilson Street. With respect to keeping the other units, which have separate entryways into Fox Street, they all are at a raised inclination. And to make them handicap accessible would either require an external, kind of ramp mechanism that you would either, install, or we would have to go into the building with making a ramp, and that just uses way too much space, and it just it makes the space useless by accommodating any sort of handicap access. That's why we are defaulting to make them residential units just off of that street because of because of that particular variable. So
Week, and then I need a motion to receive the report.
Through you, Madam Mayor. That was, I made a similar notation, but I guess, they clearly look like they're going to be, they'll be helpful for people with mobility issues because they're at ground level. It's not, you won't call for the accessible parking. And I too, like the mayor, thought they were like, they look lovely. And I think this is great if you've had the space empty, and there's no interest at the time to for any businesses at the point. I think this is wonderful. I think it looks great.
Looking for a motion to receive the report by Rita Jabor, Manager of Planning Services, regarding the site-specific zoning amendments for 793 County Road 50 East and 14 Wilson Avenue to be received. Deputy Mayor Shepley, supported by Councillor Guerin. Any questions to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Looking for a motion to adjourn our special meeting. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor Verbeek, any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And we'll see everybody at 6 o'clock.